he talked about that, and then he just said how much conflict they was experiencing with each other. Like days before the event, he was getting threats that he felt like was coming from Jay-Z. Like Jay-Z was trying to basically.
Under the cold glare of institutional lights, in a courtroom that had already heard more than its share of shocking confessions, R. Kelly leaned forward in his seat, his wrists chained, his expression eerily calm. The man, once synonymous with smooth ballads and whispered seduction, had nothing to sing this time. Just 6 words, delivered like a scalpel. They think I was the worst one. The silence hung. Then he said it, slow, clear, deliberate, but I wasn't. He was worse than me. One name followed. It wasn't whispered, it wasn't avoided, it was spoken with venom. Sean Diddy Combs.
Attorneys for disgraced Chicago musician R. Kelly have filed a petition to the U.S. Supreme Court to review his conviction for federal crimes.
We've seen many trials. We've watched tears fall from once untouchable icons, seen the curtain pulled back on legends. But this moment landed differently. This wasn't just one disgraced singer throwing darts from a prison bench. This was an apex predator calling out a kingpin. A figure convicted of exploiting power, now painting himself as a minor player in a much darker theater. The air in that courtroom turned acidic. Everyone knew this wasn't just courtroom theater. This was a message. Kelly's legal appeal had been crushed. The Supreme Court boomed, but so did his prison sentence. With nothing left to lose, he turned the spotlight and the heat on Diddy. And what he alleged wasn't chaos. It wasn't a series of bad nights or broken relationships, it was an institution. Kelly called it that himself, an institution, something designed, engineered, systemic. If what Kelly described is even half true, we aren't just talking about a man who partied too hard or lost control. We're looking at someone who, according to testimony, perfected the blueprint of celebrity domination, not for stardom, but for control, for silence, and for access. You think I ran an operation, Kelly said. He ran an institution. One insider later told us Kelly was messy, Diddy was clean, clinical, and that made him dangerous. Let's be clear, Diddy's legal woes didn't start with this moment. For years, the rumors have lingered. The coded language, the euphemisms, the hush-hush conversations at after-parties. The NDAs passed around like party favors. But Kelly's words sliced through the noise like a siren. Suddenly, Diddy wasn't just an accused man fighting civil suits and headlines. He was being cast as the mastermind, the puppeteer. A man who, if you believe the accusations, used his empire, his businesses, his brand, even his family's fame as camouflage for something predatory, calculated, and ruthless.
Look at Diddy, for instance. Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at him. Mm-hmm. Let's take a look at. He has videos. He has videos of the parties. Now, what I've heard, which I don't know how much of it is in mainstream media, I don't really follow the story that much. But what I've heard from friends that are attorneys, friends of mine that have represented me before, agents and so on, is there's a bidding war going on.
The deeper we went, the uglier it got. According to multiple testimonies and filings, these weren't wild parties spiraling out of control. They were choreographed, scripted. According to court records and several witnesses, Diddy allegedly orchestrated freak-off events with layers of secrecy that would make a spy agency blush. Invitation only, coded language, security layers so tight that phones were locked in boxes, and guests signed waivers without reading a word. Rooms within rooms. Surveillance blackouts. A former aide claimed Diddy once installed soundproof doors in a Manhattan penthouse suite because he hated interruptions. Not because of sound, because of control. And here's where the accusations become something far bigger than personal scandal. Kelly told the court that Diddy's genius wasn't in what he did, but in how he protected himself while doing it. The parties, the intimidation, the financial payoffs, allegedly, they all pointed to a structure. Something built to be impenetrable. And maybe that's where the real fear lies, because if a man like Diddy could build something like this, how many people helped him? How many looked the other way? How many gained from the silence?
To not be involved, a famous singer, to not come out, here's the price. And that they're just selling to the individuals that are in those, this is what I heard, they're selling those videos. So if you're Tommy X, and Tommy X is a big, big movie star. And he was at some of the Diddy parties. He was in one of those bedrooms with 3 other men, and he's happily married to a woman, and blah. Tommy doesn't want that video to come out.
That brings us to the most chilling detail yet, the alleged black book. Not a prop, not a rumor passed in DM gossip threads, but a very real object, according to at least 3 former insiders, 2 assistants, and a former road manager. They all describe a coded ledger kept in a private safe, allegedly listing contacts, payouts, preferences, and moments. Some say it's digital, some say it's analog, stashed behind a false panel in a Miami studio. None of them claim to have seen it directly, but all of them say they were warned never to ask about it.
Same thing for Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the the interesting thing about the Epstein and the theory about Epstein is we know he filmed people for sure on that island. He has a lot of movies, a lot of films of people that are very, very powerful political figures, and entertainers, business people. So, do you really believe that Jeffrey Epstein himself? And of course not. Of course not. Yeah.
If the book exists, and we're being honest, that's a massive if, it could reshape how we view the last 3 decades of music, media, and power in America. The theory, floated by at least 2 ex-industry execs, is that the book acted as both a shield and a sword. A shield from investigation, because those named inside were too powerful to let it surface, and a sword to threaten anyone thinking of testifying. Think less notebook, more detonator.
Did you ever spend time with the guy? Did you ever meet Diddy?
I've met him before, yeah.
How was he?
Very nice guy, very smart, super business. You know, I mean, he's very successful.
One former publicist claims they were shown a redacted excerpt during a panic meeting in 2015. It allegedly included names of 2 politicians, 3 major music executives, and 2 actresses, one of whom later settled a civil suit against Diddy without explanation. That publicist left the industry shortly after. The book, they said, wasn't about blackmail, it was about leverage, the kind you don't recover from. No direct proof has surfaced yet. But the allegations have turned whispers into firestorms, and they're spreading, which brings us back to the courtroom. To the man in shackles, burning down the last of his bridges. To the man he accused, locked in pre-trial detention, facing charges that read more like a mafia blueprint than an artist's downfall. Transport for purposes of exploitation, racketeering, coercion, bribery, obstruction. Freak-offs weren't just salacious stories anymore. They became forensic terms. Prosecutors even played clips, reportedly obtained from a laptop once assigned to a staff producer. Some of the footage involved baby oil, closed-circuit lighting, and participants who, according to testimony, didn't know they were being recorded.
Arguably, the defense's biggest asset in this case was the complexity and arguably the awkwardness of applying federal racketeering charges to a person who now is convicted of using his business in order to satisfy his urges. It's not the traditional application of racketeering law. Normally that's been applied to mafia-type defendants.
And maybe that's the true horror underneath this saga. Not just what was done, but how it was normalized. The NDAs, the settlements, the publicists who cleaned the mess, the record labels that looked the other way, the fans who cheered while knowing something didn't feel right. According to Kelly and echoed by others, Diddy didn't just commit these acts, he industrialized them. He made a system, one where enablers were rewarded, where victims were discredited, and where power made everything vanish. Until now. And here's where the veil starts to lift, not just on Diddy, but on the entire apparatus behind him. Because if you believe what's coming out now, he didn't maintain this alleged empire alone. Behind the glittering press junkets and award show standing ovations, there was a cast of power players working overtime to keep the machine humming. We're talking PR giants, executive handlers, legal pit bulls, and financial fixers. The kingmakers, as some insiders have started calling them. They weren't just smoothing over scandals, they were allegedly embedding them, repackaging them, burying them beneath 6-figure settlements and front-page distractions. A former entertainment publicist even claimed that you didn't say no to a Diddy job, you just asked how far you had to go to keep it clean.
What they experienced at his hands, or the threats and harassment they faced in telling the truth about what happened to them. We hope that today's verdict brings some measure of comfort and closure to the victims.
One entertainment lawyer with 2 decades under their belt told a reporter off record that certain artists had crisis plans already mapped out before any allegation even broke. Think about that, not a reactive strategy, but a proactive one. And Diddy? According to the same source, his was the most sophisticated. Teams on retainer, lobbyists on call, entire campaign drafts ready to go within minutes of bad press. Victims weren't just discredited. They were allegedly pre-smeared before they could speak. Media deals, advertising packages, and promised exclusives kept certain outlets from pushing too hard. And when silence didn't work, distraction did. Several civil attorneys representing victims in unrelated cases now say Diddy's model is being studied, not for his music, but for the legal choreography around him. The NDAs weren't just tight, they were ironclad, sometimes tied to multi-year brand licensing deals or back-end publishing rights. One alleged victim from the mid-2010s claims she was offered a consulting credit on a Bad Boy project in exchange for walking away. Another says she was flown out, paid in crypto, and signed a non-disclosure while sedated. No police report, no name, just a ghost story whispered behind velvet ropes. And that's the darkness we're being forced to confront now. How many voices were turned into shadows?
This conviction is the latest in a long line of prosecutions by this office to protect women and vulnerable minors from predators.
The silence was never accidental. According to 3 music industry veterans who worked with Diddy's camp in the late 2000s, it was built into the business. Guest lists were pre-vetted by private intel firms. Staff had their phones stripped at the gate. Even drivers were allegedly rotated to prevent anyone from knowing too much. There were layers within layers, one former assistant said. People thought they were at the center of the operation. They weren't even close. But if the logistics were chilling, the psychology behind the people running them might be even darker. Over and over, from court documents to whispered leaks, one theme keeps surfacing. Diddy's closest lieutenants didn't just obey orders, they believed in them. Or feared not to. Former aides, bodyguards, and executive assistants describe a kind of devotion that blurs the line between professional loyalty and psychological captivity. These weren't just employees cashing checks. They were part of a culture built on surveillance, secrecy, and submission. Many weren't allowed personal phones, some had curfews, and others were reportedly made to recite affirmations about protecting the circle. It wasn't a job, it was a role, a part in a play where the boss wrote the script. And the consequences for going off book were severe.
I'll tell you, I don't know how much, I don't like to say things that I know unless I see it. That there's a little difference, you know. But was it discussed? Was there descriptions from people I know that were at those? Yes, but here's another thing. So how many of these big entertainment parties and over the years and everything with as successful as you are, have you been around? Does anyone ever come up to you at a certain hour and say, okay, it's time to go? At those parties, they did.
Accounts from insiders suggest that Diddy's control extended well beyond the physical. It was emotional, financial, even spiritual. Several former team members have said that he fostered an atmosphere where he alone was a source of opportunity, of status, of survival. Promotions came not with performance but proximity. Access to his world, his cars, his homes, his parties, was granted and revoked like a divine reward, and those who questioned his actions, isolated, demoted, or quietly removed. One former driver claimed that disappearing from the inner circle was treated like a warning to others, stay obedient or vanish. It wasn't just manipulation, it was mental programming. What makes it even harder to untangle is how many of these insiders genuinely believed they were doing something important. Some saw themselves as guardians of a legacy, protectors of a creative genius. Others were seduced by the illusion of family, a warped camaraderie forged in late-night planning meetings, exclusive retreats, and whispered reminders that outsiders wouldn't understand. That sense of belonging became a trap. Those who once ran errands, booked hotel blocks, or enforced no phone rules eventually became instruments of this system, not monsters themselves, but extensions of someone else's will, numbed by repetition and rewarded just enough to stay silent.
People I don't think realized was he had cameras all over the place, unbeknownst to them. And now he has all that footage, supposedly. This is what I'm told. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens if, you're a huge, iconic, TV star or movie star, and you're in some very, very...
And yet, fear was never far. Whispers about people being followed, about calls from blocked numbers reminding them to stay quiet, about visits from security agents under the guise of checking in. Some have described waking up in cold sweats, unsure if they had crossed a line or forgotten something critical. The paranoia wasn't accidental. It was baked into the foundation. Control wasn't just maintained through influence. It was enforced with subtle threats, veiled reminders of what had happened to others who talk too much. For some, even now, years later, the fear lingers like smoke in the lungs. What this reveals isn't just one man's power. It's the mechanism by which power replicates itself. The inner circle around Diddy, if these reports are true, functioned like a human firewall. They shielded him. Not always willingly, not always knowingly, but efficiently. Some did it for status, some for money, some just to survive. And that's the most disturbing part of all. When influence becomes religion and compliance becomes faith, justice doesn't just have to crack a case. It has to dismantle a belief system.
I'm not sure. I don't buy for a minute that he's going to prison without getting out of here somewhere and stashing $2 billion or whatever. I think he has that kind of power, meaning Sean himself. But remember, it goes a lot deeper than that.
And then there's the island. Oh yes, the island. If the compound stories are true, it was the jewel of this secretive empire. Whispers call it the island of no return, but the jet manifests tell a story that's far from folklore. At least 5 former pilots have anonymously confirmed charter flights to an undisclosed offshore location between 2014 and 2020. Always private jets, always passenger lists delivered last minute, and always with luggage checks that included non-negotiable surrender of electronics. Guests reportedly signed multi-page NDAs on arrival, some even enforced with biometric scans. The island itself? A sprawling estate allegedly hidden behind international shell companies. 2 villas, a central lodge, and 1 dock only accessible by high-speed tender. Security, according to one source, was run by ex-military contractors. Satellite surveillance blocked, all comms monitored. The events, described by insiders as beyond comprehension. No photos, no videos, just stories. Some so disturbing we're not even going to speculate here. But what's critical is who was there. Names that show up again and again. Executives, actors, financiers, athletes, and not all of them men.
I don't know this, but it just seems very suspicious when you go through and you look at in the history of different people that can make you go away if listen, I've worried about some of the things that I talk about on my show.
One former sound tech who worked for a luxury events company says he was flown in once to set up a multi-room audio system, then flown out the same night. No contact, no explanations. It wasn't just about control, he said. It was about ritual. You knew something was happening, but you also knew not to ask. If any of this sounds outlandish, remember, we once thought it impossible that someone like R. Kelly could evade consequences for more than 2 decades. We thought powerful men couldn't possibly operate in plain sight with this level of coordination. And yet, here we are, with footage, with filings, with testimonies that match up across years, across states, across victims who've never met. If even 10% of the island allegations are true, the legal storm brewing is only the beginning. What happens when victims start speaking out? What happens when someone leaks the guest list? And maybe that's what R. Kelly was trying to provoke. Because let's not forget, his warning wasn't a throwaway moment. He didn't just build a brand, he told the court. He built a fortress of silence. This wasn't a lashing out, it was a deliberate act of demolition, a call for the system to eat itself. He's already lost everything, but what does he gain by burning down another man? Unless, just maybe, he wants to watch the whole thing collapse. Because what's coming out now isn't just about Diddy, it's about a blueprint that's been used before, it's probably being used right now.
I'm very tired of all of the lies. I've been hearing things and seeing things on the blogs and, I'm just...
So the question we're left with, what other names are buried in that fortress? Who signed the checks? Who planned the settlements? Who knew and who helped keep it quiet? This isn't about cancel culture. This isn't about one star falling from grace. This is about the silence that gets bought, the truth that gets suppressed, and the power that refuses to answer to anyone but itself. If even a fraction of this empire existed, how many others are out there right now, built the same way, waiting for someone to speak? And when that someone does, will we listen? Or will we look away again? So tell us, how deep do you think this goes? Is this the unraveling of an untouchable empire, or just the first crack in something even bigger? Drop your thoughts below, and if you're still reeling like we are, hold tight. The truth might be uglier than we ever imagined. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and stay loud.